The film begins with Chris Kelvin, a skilled therapist. He was lying on his bed, lost in introspection. Later in his role as a therapist, Chris led a group therapy session. Amidst his professional duties, he managed to work calls diligently, scheduling appointments with his diverse clientele. Returning home, Chris received an unexpected call that would alter the course of his life, and representatives from DBA, the company overseeing the Solaris space station, their message carried the weight of a distress signal originating from his friend Dr. Guyberian. Troubled yet cryptic, Guyberian implored Chris for assistance in comprehending an enigmatic occurrence transpiring on Solaris. And when Chris inquired about the absence of a security team, he was informed that one had been dispatched but had tragically vanished, severing all contact. The company now faced a disorienting predicament, and they reluctantly turned to Chris, their final hope. Though hesitant to involve a civilian, they implored him to aid in retrieval of the remaining crew members and their safe return to Earth, assuring Chris that he would spend most of his journey in a state of slumber, and they painted him as their last resort. Eventually swayed by their appeals, Chris consented to embark on a solitary odyssey aboard the vessel known as the Athena. As they approached the ship, his gaze fixated on the Solaris, the celestial body around which the colossal space station orbited. Upon arrival at the station, he commenced his exploration, his senses immediately drawn to bloodstains adorning the walls and floor. Venturing further, he stumbled upon a room containing bags, one bearing the name of his late friend, Guyberian. To his shock and dismay, he discovered Guyberian's lifeless body within one of the bags, accompanied by another corpse. It dawned on Chris that Guyberian had transmitted the video prior to his demise. Driven by a mix of curiosity and mounting concern, Chris continued to investigate the space station. His path led him to encounter a man named Snow, with whom he broached the subject of the bloodshed. Snow elucidated that it resulted from the untimely demise of a former crew member, Katar, at the hands of unidentified security forces. Chris pressed for answers regarding Guyberian's fate, to which Snow reluctantly confessed that his friend had taken his own life. Seeking further elucidation, he inquired about the whereabouts of the other crew members, only to learn that they had either succumbed to death or vanished without a trace. As Chris probed for the truth, Snow evaded full disclosure, enigmatically suggesting that understanding would only come through first-hand experience. Compelled by an insatiable thirst for knowledge, Chris sought out Dr. Gordon, the only remaining survivor, who had isolated herself within her chamber. It became evident that Gordon, too, harbored reservations about divulging the station's secrets. Echoing Snow's sentiment, she insisted that comprehending the phenomenon necessitated a personal encounter. Chris found himself bewildered as Gordon concluded their exchange by closing the door firmly, and in his retreat, Chris caught sight of a young boy aboard the ship, impulsively pursuing him, yet the child vanished before his eyes. Snow later revealed that the boy was Michael, the son of Jaren, one of the crew members. Determined to gain clarity, Chris insisted on interviewing Snow and Gordon, hoping to penetrate the veil of secrecy shrouding Solaris. Gordon, intimately acquainted with the project's workings, disclosed her extensive involvement in research into the planet's economic potential. And during his conversation with Snow, a notion took root within Chris. He proposed an audacious plan: to abandon the ship and bring an end to the ordeal. Snow, burdened by his own circumstances, admitted his desire to leave but revealed that Gordon's presence hindered such a course of action. As night fell, Chris surrendered himself to sleep, only to be roused by the tender touch of a woman. Startled, he beheld the presence of Rhea, his deceased wife, standing by his side. Jolted by her sudden appearance, Chris stumbled out of bed, a mixture of alarm and fear coursing through him. Though Rhea's response to his inquiries about their shared memories proved accurate, Chris recognized that this apparition was not the genuine Rhea, and determined to escape her clutches, he led her outside, revealing the escape pod's interior. In a moment of distraction, he dispatched the escape pod into the vast expanse of space, severing ties with the replica of his wife. Subsequently, Chris confided in Snow, unburdening himself with the weight of his actions and recounting his encounter with the spherical Rhea. Snow revealed the unsettling truth that the replicas haunting the crew members were manifestations of their loved ones as well. Once more surrendering to sleep, Chris delved into vivid dreams, reliving cherished memories with Rhea. Within these reveries, Chris revisited the recollection of Rhea, confiding in him about her imaginary friend and the peculiar manner in which her mother communicated solely through the imagined companion. Upon waking, Chris finds another replica of Rhea has appeared, and this time he allows her to stay. As they snuggle, Rhea confesses that she doesn't remember anything except him, and they converse, and Rhea asks if they've been separated, which he confirms, and Rhea feels she isn't human and that her memories are fabricated. She feels she lacks the emotional connection that comes with having lived through these memories, and a flashback reveals that the real Rhea took a pregnancy test and discovered she was pregnant, and without informing Chris, she decided to terminate it. However, when Chris found out, he was enraged, and Rhea tried to explain to him that she had to do it, and that she wasn't sure if he had even wanted a child. In his anger, Chris refused to listen to her and attempted to leave the house, and Rhea pleaded with him to stay, believing she couldn't live without him, but Chris left anyways. After Chris left, Rhea was so mentally distressed and heartbroken that she overdosed on pills and ended her life. In the present, Chris tells Rhea that he had returned for her but found her dead. He apologizes to Rhea for leaving her, and later Chris, Rhea, and Gordon and Snow sit down to discuss everything. Snow reveals that he believes the visitors are composed of subatomic particles stabilized by the Higgins field. Gordon then discusses applying a negative Higgs field to disintegrate the visitors, and she mentions that she wants to risk applying the entire ship's power to this, and Chris suggests to her that they can take the findings back to Earth, and Gordon realizes that Chris has become attached to Rhea's replica. Angered by his suggestion, Gordon asks him what would happen if the aliens followed them to Earth and caused widespread chaos. Chris refused to let Gordon destroy Rhea, and in her anger, Gordon reveals that Chris sent the first Rhea replica into space. Chris tries to explain that he was confused, but Rhea walks away extremely upset, while Chris tries to stop her. Chris confronts Gordon about her outburst, and she tries to calmly explain that the Rhea replica is a part of Chris's mind. He doesn't want to believe her, so she exclaims that Rhea is not human and is a strange alien entity. Chris tries to argue with her, but Gordon is firm in her decision, and that they will not be bringing the Rhea replica back with them. Later at night, Rhea cries while Chris sleeps next to her, and as Chris wakes up, apparently still dreaming, he sees a vision of the Guyberian in the corner of his room. He was confused and tries to turn on the lights, but Guyberian stops him, and Chris asks his friend why he killed himself, and he admits that it seemed like a good idea, but now he rejects it. Guyberian reminds Chris that these replicas are a part of the Solaris and are not real. Chris asks Guyberian what Solaris wants from them, but it is told that there is no answer to that, and the only solution is to leave. Guyberian also cryptically adds that there are no answers here, and only choices. Suddenly, Chris awakens to find that Rhea has disappeared from his side, and he goes to look for her, and he finds her lying face down in a room next to a puddle of liquid oxygen. He moves her body to find the half of her face had been burnt and she is dead, and in a state of panic, Chris calls out to Gordon and carries her body back to the room, and Snow and Gordon join Chris, who reveals that Rhea drank the liquid oxygen and then offed herself. Chris believes that Rhea is dead, but suddenly Rhea begins to resurrect in front of everyone, and Chris couldn't believe his eyes, and when she opens hers, Rhea didn't seem happy about being alive again. Gordon discusses two components of a device with the power to make the replicas disappear. She mentioned that she used it on her own replica, and Rhea wants to use the machine so she can disappear. Chris was not happy with this and argues with Rhea about it, and Rhea tells Chris that she's not a complete person because she came from the memory of his late wife, and she tells him that this version of her is suicidal because he remembers the real Rhea as such. Chris reveals that he regrets leaving the house even when she asked him not to because he was angry. He believes that this is his chance to correct his mistake, and Chris begins taking a chemical stimulant to stay awake, so Rhea doesn't off herself. One night, Rhea convinces Chris to lie down, after which he falls asleep, and she manages to convince Gordon to use the apparatus on her. In a video message, she explains to Chris that she begged Gordon to make her disappear. Chris runs to confront Gordon, calling her a murderer, and Gordon insists that she did the right thing. Gordon also tries to turn the AI of the ship back on so they can return to Earth. Suddenly, they notice blood on the ceiling, and upon investigation, they discovered that the real Snow had been dead for a while, and what Snow had been talking to was a replica. Confronting Snow's replica, they learned that the real Snow attacked the replica, and the replica killed him in self-defense. Gordon decides to use the Higgs apparatus on Snow, but Snow lets him know that they don't have much time. Solaris had been gaining mass, and their ship is now a lot closer to the planet due to its gravitational field. He also tells them that the Higgs device drained the fuel cell reactors so that they can use this ship to go back. He suggests that they should take the antenna back to Earth. Gordon and Chris prepared to leave the ship and climb onto the Athena, and sometime later, Chris was back to Earth, forcing himself to act normal. He felt like the word Earth was a strange one now, and it seems unfamiliar. He admits that he doesn't know how he used to live before, and that he's faking his way throughout life now. He's been mimicking the expressions and emotions of other people around him, but he doesn't know how to act anymore. Chris was haunted by the idea that he remembers Rhea wrong, and that he may be wrong about everything else. One day while cutting vegetables, Chris managed to cut his finger, and as he rinses the wound underwater, he sees that his cut has instantly healed. Chris realizes that he never returned to Earth, and a flashback shows that Chris decided not to go to the Athena, and Gordon left without him. As he walks around the space station, it starts getting engulfed by Solaris, and Chris continues walking around, calling out for Rhea, and he starts hearing a loud sound, causing him to cover his ears. Snow looks up at the sky as the station was completely engulfed by Solaris. The replica of Guyberian's son Michael appears and offers Chris support, and as their fingers almost touch, Chris finds himself back in his apartment, and he hears Rhea's voice and turns around to find the love of his life smiling at him. With tears in his eyes, he asks her if he's alive or dead, and Rhea simply responds that they don't have to worry about those things anymore, and she tells him that they're together now, and everything they've done is forgiven. Chris tightly embraces Rhea and shares a passionate kiss with her, which depicts the end of their undecided fate.